Stop pretending. The words cut through the fourth-floor hallway before Amelia Cain had decided to say them. The man in grey maintenance coveralls froze his mop bucket. 30 seconds earlier, he had been kneeling beside an elderly patient who had collapsed near the elevators. He had checked the man's carotid pulse, tested his pupils, positioned him to protect his airway. Then, when the nurses arrived, he gave them a precise clinical report and stepped away as if none of it had happened. Now he slowly turned toward the woman in the wheelchair. Amelia held his gaze. "You're not a maintenance worker," something tightened behind his brown eyes. Then he glanced at the badge clipped to his chest. "Badge says I am. Your badge is lying." For 1 second the mask slipped, and Amelia saw it. Not guilt, fear. The fear of a man who had spent years making sure no one noticed what he really was. Neither of them knew it yet, but that single moment would uncover 2 ruined lives, a 7-year conspiracy, and the truth about why Amelia had been unable to walk for 5 years. The hallway smelled like antiseptic and money. That was the thing no one said about Cain Medical Group's flagship hospital. Wealth had its own scent, sanitized, controlled, cold beneath the surface. Amelia Cain moved through its corridors at 7:14 every morning, 46 minutes before anyone expected her. She liked the hospital best before the performance began. Before executives straightened their jackets at the sight of her. Before department heads arranged their faces into careful respect. Before every conversation became a presentation. At 31, Amelia was worth nearly $4 billion. She had founded Cain Medical Group and turned one struggling Baltimore hospital into the largest private hospital network on the eastern seaboard. She was brilliant, feared, almost impossible to deceive, and completely unable to feel her legs. That morning she had stopped near the 4th-floor nurses' station to watch the shift change. For a few brief seconds, no one had noticed her. Then the elderly patient collapsed. The maintenance worker reached him first. He did not panic. He did not shout. He did not fumble for his radio. He assessed. 2 fingers to the carotid artery, eyes on the chest, a quick pupil check. Recovery position. When 2 nurses rushed over, he delivered the facts in clipped clinical order. Pulse rapid and thready. Approximately 1 minute since collapse. No visible head trauma. Left arm tremor began after he went down. Then he stepped back. He picked up his mop. And he tried to disappear. Amelia had built an empire by noticing what other people wanted ignored. So she followed him. Stop pretending. Now they faced each other beneath the white hospital lights. The man's expression had gone perfectly blank. It was the particular calm of someone who had trained himself not to react under pressure. He was tall, mid-30s, dark hair. A small scar above his left eyebrow that looked surgical rather than accidental. "Ma'am," he said, "that report you gave the nurses," Amelia said. "You checked his pupils, you protected his airway, you estimated the time of collapse." She glanced at the mop in his hand. "That is not a mop and bucket education." His jaw flexed once. "I watch medical documentaries." Amelia stared at him for 3 silent seconds. Then she turned her wheelchair and rolled away. Behind her she heard him release the breath he had been holding. His name was Ethan Cole, at least that was the name in his employee file. Her assistant Diane placed the folder on Amelia's desk less than an hour later. 34 years old, Diane said. Single father, 1 daughter, Lily. 7. Amelia opened the file. It was thin, too thin. Ethan had supposedly worked for a cleaning contractor in Baltimore. Before that, there was an 18-month gap marked self-employed. Before that, nothing. His history ended 3 years earlier, as if Ethan Cole had simply appeared in the world at 31. "Get security," Amelia said. Diane hesitated. "Is there a problem? I don't know yet. What do you want them to look for? Everything." By 4:47 that afternoon, the real file was on Amelia's desk. She read the first page. Then she closed the folder, opened it again and read it more slowly. Dr. Ethan Cole, former neurosurgeon at Johns Hopkins, board certified, published. By the age of 27, he had been considered one of the most precise surgical talents his program had produced in a decade. Then a state senator died on his operating table. Richard Goss, 43, a routine craniotomy that should not have killed him. Post-operative toxicology found a contraindicated beta-adrenergic compound in his system. The hospital's internal review concluded that Ethan had administered it. His license was suspended within days, permanently revoked 3 months later. His career disappeared in 72 hours. His wife, Claire, left before the year was over. She did not fight for custody of Lily. She simply stopped answering calls. Ethan became a single father with no license, no reputation, and no institution willing to hire him. Amelia read the toxicology report twice, then the internal review, then the surgical timeline. At 11:19 a.m., the medication had been logged under Ethan's ID. But at 11:19, Ethan's hands were inside Senator Goss's skull. His operative notes were time-stamped. 2 nurses and an assisting surgeon had witnessed that he never broke scrub. He could not have administered a drug in the corridor outside the operating room while performing active cranial decompression inside it. The contradiction was obvious. which meant someone powerful had needed everyone to ignore it. Amelia leaned back in her chair. She thought of Ethan kneeling beside the collapsed patient with the quiet precision of a man who had done it 10,000 times. She thought of what it must cost to carry that knowledge in silence, to know you could save a life, and to wake up every morning wearing coveralls because the world had decided your hands were dangerous. She called Diane. Schedule 15 minutes with Ethan Cole tomorrow morning. Formal, no agenda. Don't tell him who requested it. The meeting never happened. At 2:11 the next morning, Amelia's private phone rang. The hospital's pediatric cardiac unit only used that number in emergencies. Mrs. Cain, the attending physician, said, "We have a 7-year-old patient named Lily Cole." Amelia sat upright. Lily had arrived in acute cardiac distress. Tachycardic. Her congenital ventricular septal defect, managed conservatively for years, had worsened without warning. She needed surgery. Immediately, the estimated cost, including post-operative care, was $140,000. Ethan's maintenance insurance covered 11%. Amelia sat in the darkness of her apartment listening to the faint hum of the city beyond the windows. Then she called her chief financial officer, charged Lily Cole's surgery to the Foundation's pediatric fund. There was a pause. Her application was denied 3 months ago. Open it. On what basis? Mine. Another pause. Yes, Ms. Cain. No name on the authorization. Classify it as an anonymous donor allocation. Do it before the morning billing cycle. She ended the call. Then she sat alone until sunrise. It was a generous act. It was also calculated. That was the only way Amelia knew how to be generous. Quietly. Through systems. At a distance where no one could ask what it meant. For the next week, Amelia told herself she was simply monitoring an unusual employee situation. That was the language she preferred. Monitoring, employee, situation. Words clean enough to keep emotion from touching them. Each morning she reviewed Ethan's badge records. He arrived at 5:50. He left at 3:30. He never stayed 1 minute beyond the hours for which he was paid. But 3 times each day his maintenance route curved toward the pediatric wing, 7:02 a.m., 11:14 a.m., 1:47 p.m. He was checking on Lily, always briefly, always without neglecting his shift. Hospitals, Amelia had learned, ran on invisible economies. A cafeteria worker slipping an extra meal to a family that had spent the night beside a child. An orderly opening the blinds for a patient who could no longer reach them. A nurse remembering which widower needed someone to ask about his dog. Ethan had become part of that economy almost immediately. He repaired an elderly woman's wheelchair instead of making her wait 3 days for the request to be processed. He talked a terrified boy through a blood draw by explaining every movement before it happened. He noticed when a patient was confused before the chart reflected it. He never did any of it for attention. He did necessary things because they were necessary. On Tuesday, Amelia quietly altered the maintenance schedule. Duct inspections, floors 2 through 4, East Wing. The new route would take Ethan past her office 3 times that morning. She did not admit, even to herself, that she wanted him close enough to observe. Ethan discovered the truth about Lily's surgery on Thursday. Amelia had assumed the anonymity would hold. The Foundation approved dozens of cases every quarter. But Ethan Cole did not accept miracles without examining their paperwork. He spent 2 days following authorization codes through the billing system, quietly, methodically. Then he found Amelia in the East Corridor reviewing plans for the oncology wing, Miss Cain. She finished reading the line in front of her before turning. Mr. Cole. He was still in his coveralls, radio at his belt. The skin on his hands was hot from washing. The authorization for Lily's surgery, he said. That was you, not a question. The Foundation supports pediatric cases based on need. Her file was denied 3 months ago. Criteria are reviewed continuously. Nothing in her file changed. Amelia said nothing. The only thing that changed, Ethan continued, was that you saw me last Tuesday. His voice was quiet. There was no accusation in it. That made it harder to dismiss. Amelia met his eyes. Your daughter needed surgery. She received it. He studied her face, weighing the deflection. Then he let it go. Thank you. No dramatic gratitude. No promise that he could never repay her. Just 2 honest words. Amelia found she preferred them. How is she? For the first time, something in his expression loosened. She keeps asking when she can go back to school. That's a good sign. She has also filed a formal complaint about the dessert portions. Amelia almost smiled. Then her recovery is clearly progressing. Ethan nodded. He remained in front of her for another second, as if deciding whether to step through a door he could never close again. Then he said, you reviewed Senator Goss's toxicology file. Amelia went still. I don't know how you accessed it, he continued. But someone searched my legal record yesterday from this hospital's network. You watch systems carefully. I learned to. You weren't as careful as you thought, Amelia said. His eyes sharpened. Neither were the people who built the case against you. The corridor was empty. Morning sunlight spilled through the east-facing windows, pale and uncertain. Ethan did not move. "What do you want from me?" he asked. Amelia could have answered with a strategy. She could have said cooperation, information, leverage. Instead, she told him the truth. "I don't know yet." He looked at her for a long moment, then he lifted his radio and walked away. Amelia watched him go, and one thought stayed with her. "I have not told anyone the truth about anything important in 4 years, and I just told him." The next change between them began with what looked like an accident. Amelia nearly fainted in her office on a Tuesday afternoon. It was not dramatic, her vision narrowed. The room tilted, her body slid sideways in the wheelchair, and she caught herself against the desk, hard enough to bruise her palm. She was alone, or thought she was. Ethan had come to repair a ventilation panel. Her door was half open, and he saw her through the gap. He crossed the room in 4 steps, no alarm, no performance. He checked her airway, pressed 2 fingers to her wrist, and lowered his voice. "Breathe out slowly." She did. Again. She obeyed before realizing she had. "Have you eaten today?" "I don't remember. That means no." He opened the cabinet behind her desk, found the protein bars Diane kept there, and unwrapped one. When Amelia did not take it, he placed it in front of her. Then he stepped back, not to give her space, to give her dignity. She ate half. Ethan watched the color return to her face. "When did the chronic pain begin?" Amelia looked up sharply. He nodded toward her arms. "You push harder with your right side. Your left shoulder compensates. You've been doing it for months. That proves I use a wheelchair." "No, it suggests a secondary spinal problem. Unless the primary injury is different from what your records say." The room became very still. Amelia had ended conversations with neurologists for less. She had silenced board members, journalists, and even her mother with one cold look. But Ethan was not staring at her chair. He was looking at her like she was a case with missing information, not a tragedy, not an inspiration, a problem that might have an answer. "I was told I would never walk again," she said. "After what kind of injury?" "A car accident. 5 years ago." "How fast?" "About 40 miles an hour. Impact direction, T-bone, driver's side." He thought for a moment. "Lateral collisions at that speed usually affect the cervical or upper thoracic vertebrae. Your paralysis is complete and bilateral below L2. So the pattern is more consistent with severe compression." He paused. "Or a surgical intervention." Amelia stared at him. "I'm not a doctor," he said. "Yes, you are." His face changed, only slightly, but enough. "Someone hurt you," Amelia said. It was not a question. Ethan's eyes held hers. Then he answered with the same words. "Someone hurt you." No one had ever said it that way. Not in 5 years. Doctors had called it an unfortunate outcome. Lawyers had called it a closed insurance matter. Victor Hale had called it a tragedy they needed to move beyond. But no one had called it what it might have been. Something done to her. Amelia did not cry. She was proud of that. Her eyes betrayed her anyway. Ethan turned toward the window, offering her the privacy of his profile. "The first 48 hours after your accident," he said. "Do you remember what spinal stabilizer they administered?" "Verospinal." His jaw tightened. "They told me it was standard protocol." Ethan said nothing. He did not need to. Amelia knew that silence. It was the silence of a man who had just recognized a name he wished he had never heard. Victor Hale had been Cain Medical Group's chief operating officer for 15 years. He was 62, silver-haired, composed, and never appeared to hurry. He had been Amelia's mentor before he became her partner. When she was 24, still a graduate student with a talent for finding numbers that did not belong, Victor had offered her capital, introductions, and the kind of confidence young founders mistake for faith. Together they acquired a failing hospital in Baltimore, then another, then 3 more. Eventually, Cain Medical Group grew into 11 facilities across 4 states. When Amelia's car crashed, Victor stabilized the board. When she spent 18 months learning how to live in a body that no longer obeyed her, Victor protected the company. When investors questioned whether a woman in a wheelchair could lead a medical empire, Victor stood beside her. He had presented himself as the one person who never doubted her. That was why she had never thought to doubt him. Victor did not merely solve problems. He arranged the world so problems arrived already serving him. For years, Cain Medical Group's hospitals had entered procurement contracts with pharmaceutical companies connected through layers of subsidiaries. Patient data had been stripped of names, labeled compliant, and sold to research aggregators. Experimental drugs had been slipped into approved protocols. Adverse events had been softened in reports. At the center of those arrangements was Harrow Therapeutics. 7 years earlier, a junior audit manager had noticed an unusual prescribing cluster across Cain's Baltimore facilities. The report reached Amelia. She followed it herself. Quietly, the trail led toward Harrow, then her brakes failed. The crash happened at an intersection she used every day. The traffic camera had been serviced 48 hours earlier. The insurance investigation found no evidence of tampering. Victor visited her hospital room and told her not to think about work. He took her laptop. He said he was protecting her, and the preliminary audit report disappeared. Ethan's destruction had begun around the same time. He had been preparing research on suppressed adverse events in post-operative spinal care. The manufacturer at the center of his findings was Harrow Therapeutics. Victor learned about the unpublished paper through a contact on Ethan's institutional ethics board. Then Senator Goss died. A medication was logged under Ethan's ID while he was still scrubbed into surgery. The toxicology result destroyed him. The licensing committee finalized the decision, and Victor Hale sat on the oversight board that approved it. 2 threats, 1 solution. Break Ethan's credibility, break Amelia's body. For 7 years, Victor's calculation held. Then a maintenance worker knelt beside a collapsed patient, and Amelia Cain noticed too much. Ethan found the first hard connection 11 days after asking about Verospinal. He entered Amelia's office carrying 2 printed pages. He placed the first on her desk. Harrow Therapeutics had manufactured Verospinal. Victor had served on Harrow's advisory board for 6 years, including the year Cain Medical Group adopted the drug as standard post-trauma protocol. The second page carried Victor's signature. It was dated 5 years earlier. The attending physician treating Amelia after the crash had flagged the Verospinal dose as atypically aggressive. He had recommended delaying the intervention until further imaging could be completed. He had been overruled. By Victor, Amelia read the signature again. "He was afraid of you," Ethan said, "or of what I was close to finding. You were auditing prescribing patterns for cost reduction. You would have found the buried adverse event data." Amelia remembered waking after the accident. Victor had been beside her bed. He held her hand and told her the doctors had done everything possible. She had believed him. "He used Verospinal on me. The recorded dose was within the outer limit of protocol," Ethan said. "But the timing was wrong. The intervention happened before you were conscious enough to consent, before the swelling pattern was fully understood. And the damage, some came from the crash, some?" Ethan did not soften it. "Some was done afterward." Amelia placed both hands flat on her desk. The room seemed to narrow around Victor's signature. "He doesn't know we have this. No, he will know we're looking, eventually." She raised her eyes to Ethan. "Then we move faster than he expects." Ethan nodded. "Agreed." It was the first time either of them had said we. Neither mentioned it. For 11 days they worked in secret, and those 11 days became the closest thing to peace Amelia had known in years. Before Ethan, she would have defined peace as the absence of crisis. She learned it was something more specific. Coffee at the right temperature. An hour with no scheduled outcome. A conversation that did not need to accomplish anything. The presence of another person who did not ask her to perform. Lily was discharged on Friday. She was small for 7, with Ethan's brown eyes and a seriousness that vanished whenever she laughed. Her laugh was sudden and total. It seemed to surprise even her. She had strong opinions about the hospital. The dessert portions were inadequate. The pediatric wing needed more windows, and orange, she informed Amelia, was an irresponsible color for the walls. "I would like to speak to whoever approved it." "That was probably me," Amelia said. Lily studied her. "Then you made a bad decision." "I've made several." That answer seemed to earn Amelia a small amount of trust. Lily evaluated adults carefully. She had spent too much time in hospitals not to. After nearly 40 minutes, she announced her conclusion. "You don't talk to me like I'm sick." "You're not sick," Amelia replied. "You had a mechanical problem. It was repaired." Lily's eyes widened. "Dad says that. Your father is right. He says the heart is a pump. It is. He knows a lot about hearts." A shadow passed over Lily's face. Then she looked down and picked at a loose thread on her blanket. "He cries sometimes," she said, "when he thinks I'm asleep." Amelia watched her. Lily did not say it like a complaint. She said it like evidence. "That means he loves you very much." "I know." Lily looked up. "Does anyone love you that much?" The question had no cruelty in it. That made it harder. Amelia considered deflecting. Then she decided a child's honesty deserved honesty in return. "I'm working on it." Lily nodded, apparently satisfied. "Okay." She returned to the loose thread. The following morning, Ethan appeared at Amelia's office with 2 cups of coffee. It was Saturday. He was off duty. He knocked once, entered, and placed a cup on her desk. Then he sat across from her without waiting to be invited. That was new. "Lily thinks you're secretly a princess," he said. "Based on what evidence?" "The office." "The office. The building. The way people become nervous when you move past them." "I'm not a princess." He looked at her over the rim of his cup. "Princesses wait to be rescued." Outside, rain pressed against the windows. The office was warm. The coffee was exactly the temperature Amelia preferred, though she had never told him. She wrapped her hands around the cup. "There's something I haven't told you." "I know." She gave him a look. He waited. Amelia opened the bottom drawer of her desk and took out a folder. "My neurologist found residual signal 18 months ago." Ethan became very still. "There is a chance," she continued. "A real anatomical chance. With the right intervention, I could recover partial function. Maybe more than partial? Possibly. And you didn't pursue it?" "No." "Why?" She looked down at the folder. "Because I had already rebuilt my life once. Her voice was quieter now. If the surgery failed, I didn't know whether I could rebuild it again. Ethan said nothing. I had spent 4 years becoming someone who did not need that hope, someone the board could not pity, someone investors could not dismiss. If I wanted to walk again, then I had something to lose. And now someone is trying to take the company anyway. She looked at him. The calculation has changed. Ethan leaned forward. If you want, I can review the imaging. You are not licensed. I know what I'm looking at. Amelia held his gaze. Then she slid the folder toward him. He opened it. For several minutes he said nothing. His eyes moved through the scans with intense concentration. The years in maintenance clothes disappeared. He was no longer hiding from what he knew. He was Dr. Ethan Cole again. This imaging is 18 months old. Yes, you should have had surgery 14 months ago. I know, the window isn't closed. But it isn't wide open either. Amelia nodded. Ethan closed the folder carefully. He did not give her a speech about bravery. He did not tell her to believe. He did not promise a miracle. Tell me when you're ready, he said. I'll be there. Amelia looked at him, and for the first time she allowed herself to name what had been happening. She had been alone for a very long time. She did not want to be alone anymore. The video arrived 4 days later. It was sent to her private email. Only 12 people knew the address. The clip lasted 15 seconds. Security footage showed Ethan entering a building on North Meridian Street at 9:00 p.m. The registered owner of that building was Hale Capital Partners, Victor's private investment company. Below the video was one sentence. He has been working with Victor from the beginning. Amelia watched it once, then twice, then a third time. She understood manufactured evidence. She knew the timestamp was too visible, the camera angle too convenient. Real betrayal rarely arrived neatly packaged with a sentence explaining what to feel. She knew that, but old wounds did not care what the mind understood. Ethan had accessed billing records. He knew her schedule. He had found Victor's signature with startling efficiency. He knew where the coffee was kept. He knew about her pain. He had seen the parts of her life she had hidden from everyone else. She had let him in. That was the thought she could not escape. Not that Ethan had deceived her, that she had allowed herself to need him before proving he was safe. For 5 years, Amelia had survived by treating trust like a liability. Then Ethan appeared, and she had wanted to believe him. She had dressed that want in analysis, called it observation, called it strategy, called it useful cooperation. But underneath every careful explanation was something frighteningly simple. He mattered. The video gave her a way out. If Ethan was a traitor, then her fear had been justified. If the video was false, then the real danger was not Ethan. It was the fact that Amelia cared whether he stayed. At 10:47 p.m. she called security. Prepare a termination order for Ethan Cole. A pause. Reason? Allied access to restricted records. Understood. Revoke his building access tonight. Yes, Miss Cain. She put down the phone. She did not watch the video again. Yeah, she already knew it was false. She fired him anyway. Because it was easier to say I was deceived than to admit. I let someone matter, and now I am terrified. Next morning, security escorted Ethan through the 4th-floor corridor. Amelia made sure there were witnesses, not because she wanted to humiliate him, because witnesses made reversals difficult, and she needed the door to stay closed. Ethan stopped in front of her. For 2 weeks he had been calling her Amelia. Now he said it once. Amelia, the sound of her name in his voice, struck something she had worked all night to bury. Don't. He searched her face. She braced for anger, for accusation. For him to demand that she explain. Instead, he nodded slowly. It was the nod of someone setting something down before it broke. Then he walked away. Lily was in the pediatric wing for a follow-up appointment. Amelia did not go to see her. She returned to her office and sat alone while the hospital continued around her. That was the cruelest thing about institutions. They could absorb a human disaster without interrupting the schedule. Victor moved 48 hours later. He called an emergency board meeting and presented evidence of financial irregularities in the Pediatric Foundation. Lily's anonymous surgical authorization had been tracked back to Amelia. Victor reframed it as misuse of charitable funds. He proposed a forensic audit, then a temporary transfer of executive authority. 4 board members immediately supported him. 3 hesitated. Victor spoke with practiced reluctance. I take no pleasure in raising this. That was how people like Victor announced the things they had spent months arranging. Amelia watched him. His voice was measured, his expression regretful. He looked exactly like the man who had sat beside her hospital bed after the crash, the man who had held her hand, the man who had ordered the procedure that damaged her spine. She had trusted him with the company, not her heart. She had been too careful for that. But the company mattered more than her heart had in those years. Cain Medical Group served 40,000 patients annually. It funded cardiac surgeries, cancer treatment, rural outreach, and research programs. Amelia had believed the institution was the clean thing she had built out of pain. Victor had stolen that version of it, not the money. She had more money than she could spend. He had stolen the meaning. When the meeting ended, Amelia returned to her office. She remained there for 4 hours. No calls, no meetings, no lights. She thought about Ethan walking away without defending himself. She thought about the video. She thought about how quickly Victor had used Lily's surgery against her. Then she finally admitted the truth. She had known. The moment she saw the footage, she had known it was designed to separate them. She had done exactly what Victor wanted because fear had made obedience feel like controlful. Her phone rang. Ethan's name appeared on the screen. She almost let it go unanswered. Then she picked up. Lily's gone. His voice was flatter than she had ever heard it. The world changed shape. When? 2 hours ago. She was at the hospital for her follow-up. I went to speak to billing. When I came back, she was gone. Security footage blank for 9 minutes. The police? They think Claire may have taken her. Did she? No. There was no hesitation. Then Victor did. No, Ethan said. Not directly, Amelia understood. Victor would never be the man seen near the child. He would hire someone, use a property hidden behind subsidiaries, create enough distance to claim ignorance. And he had not taken Lily simply to threaten Ethan. He had taken her because Ethan had found something. What did you uncover? Amelia asked. A data archive tied to Harov's trial sites, adverse events, false consent records, payments to members of the medical board. Where is it? Safe. Does Victor know? He knows I have it. Amelia turned toward her computer. I'm accessing the hospital network. You fired me for doing that. I made a mistake. That is not an apology. No, her fingers moved across the keyboard, but I will give you one after we find Lily. For the next 6 hours, they worked together from opposite ends of the city. Amelia pulled property records linked to Victor's shell companies. Ethan mapped Harov's abandoned trial locations. There were 2 former research sites. One had been converted into offices. The other, in the East Warehouse district, was listed as decommissioned. But its lease remained active. More importantly, the security system was still connected to Cain Medical Group's network. Someone had forgotten to remove it. Amelia opened the feed. A windowless room appeared on screen. Climate-controlled storage, concrete walls, metal shelving, and in the corner Lily sat with her knees against her chest. She looked frightened, but she was alive. A man stood outside the door. Ethan read the address from the property record. 12 minutes away. I'm calling the police. Then we're going. Amelia looked at Lily's image. Yes, she said, we are. Ethan did not tell her to stay behind. He did not mention her wheelchair. He did not mistake physical limitation for helplessness. He simply accepted her as the person who was coming with him. The police reached the warehouse first. Amelia and Ethan arrived less than a minute later. An officer tried to block them from entering. This is an active scene. That building is owned through a subsidiary using my hospitals, Amelia said. The security network is mine. The victim was taken from my facility, and I can identify every room in the structure. The officer looked at her, then at the tactical team moving through the entrance. Stay behind us. The building was cleared in 11 minutes. Victor was not there. He had assumed distance would protect him. He had assumed the night would buy him time. He had been wrong. When the storage room door opened, Lily stared at the officers. Then Ethan stepped into view. She ran. He dropped to his knees and caught her against his chest. Lily buried her face in his shoulder and made no sound. That silence was worse than crying. Ethan closed his eyes. One hand cradled the back of her head. The other held her so tightly his knuckles turned white. Over Lily's shoulder he looked at Amelia. She could have waited, could have chosen a better place, better words. Instead she said the only true thing she had. I'm sorry. The apology was too small for the harm. She gave it anyway. Ethan looked at her. Then he nodded once. Not forgiveness, not yet, but not rejection either. There would be time for the rest. Lily was alive. For that moment, it was enough. The man guarding her gave the police Victor's name before midnight. The warehouse records led to payments from Hale Capital. The payments led to Harov. Harov led to falsified trial results, bribed review panels, altered medication logs, and Victor's private communications. He was arrested at Logan Airport at 4:41 a.m. He was carrying 2 passports and a drive containing enough evidence to end more than his career. The charges began with conspiracy, fraud, kidnapping, unauthorized medical intervention, obstruction of justice, and evidence tampering. More followed. Ethan's Harov archive went to the state medical board before sunrise. At 7:03, the board's investigative director called Amelia. We're reopening the Goss case. All of it? All of it? You know what you'll find. There was a pause. Yes, he said. I think we do. Amelia ended the call. Morning was beginning around her. Nurses changed shifts. Medication carts rolled through the corridors. Families woke in uncomfortable chairs. Somewhere a monitor began to alarm, and someone hurried toward it. The ordinary machinery of care continued. Amelia rolled to the 4th-floor hallway, the same place where she had seen Ethan kneeling beside a stranger. The same place where she had told him to stop pretending. She sat there for a long time. Then she took out her phone and called her neurologist. I'm ready, she said. The surgery was scheduled for 6 weeks later. Before it happened, 3 things changed. The first was Ethan's license. The state medical board reviewed the Goss case, the medication logs, the scrub records, and the payments made to members of the original committee. The conclusion was unavoidable. Ethan had been framed. His medical license was reinstated. Not provisionally, not under supervision, fully reinstated. The official letter was 3 paragraphs long. Institutions rarely say we are sorry, but this one said we were wrong. After 7 years, Ethan decided that was enough. He read the letter beside Lily's bed during her final cardiac evaluation. She was drawing a detailed plan for the veterinary clinic she intended to own one day. There were separate waiting rooms for cats and dogs, a snack station for nervous owners, and, for reasons she refused to explain, a rooftop garden for goats. Ethan folded the letter carefully. He placed it in his pocket. Then he looked up at the ceiling and breathed through his nose. For a moment he saw himself at 27. Standing in a hospital corridor while administrators explained that his life was ending, a pregnant wife at her home, a daughter he had not yet met, hands trained to heal, suddenly declared unfit to touch a patient. He felt no pity for that younger man, only recognition. Lily kept drawing. "Good news?" she asked. "Yeah." His voice nearly failed. He cleared it. "Good news." She nodded as though she had expected nothing less. Then she added another goat. The second change was the board. Amelia removed the 4 members who had supported Victor's attempt to seize control. She replaced them with 2 physician researchers and a patient advocacy director. The vote was public, the reasoning was public, the evidence was public. Financial analysts called the restructuring aggressive. Amelia did not mind. She also established the Lily Cole Cardiac Fund. When she asked Lily what the fund should do, Lily considered the question with solemn concentration. "I want other kids not to be scared like I was," so that became its purpose. No child would be denied urgent cardiac care because a parent lacked the right insurance. The fund received $40 million in its first year. Amelia never announced where the initial capital came from. People speculated. She let them. The third change took place in the hospital garden. Amelia had designed the garden during the last major renovation. Real soil, seasonal plants, wide paths, benches at the proper height for wheelchair users. She had never publicly explained why those details mattered to her. On a warm Tuesday afternoon in October, she told Ethan everything. The audit report, the drive home, the intersection, the sound of metal collapsing around her, waking in the hospital unable to move, Victor beside her bed, the months after, the anger, the humiliation of needing help, the first time someone pushed her wheelchair without asking, the first board meeting where everyone spoke more slowly to her as if paralysis had reached her mind. She told him how hard she had worked to become untouchable, how she had mistaken isolation for strength, how frightened she had been when he made loneliness feel unnecessary. Ethan listened without interruption. When she finished, he did not say, "I can't imagine." He did not tell her she was brave. He said, "You built all of this while carrying that." Amelia looked toward the garden wall. "I didn't know what else to do." "Yeah," he said softly. "I know." They sat in silence. A pigeon landed on the bench across from them, examined both humans with obvious disappointment, and flew away. Beyond the wall, a delivery truck reversed through the service lane. The world continued in its ordinary way. "I was wrong about you," Amelia said. Ethan said nothing, in the worst possible way. At the worst possible moment. "You were afraid. That doesn't excuse it." "No," she turned toward him. "You lost your job. I got another one. You nearly lost Lily. That was I made it easier for him." Yes, Amelia appreciated that he did not rescue her from the truth. "I knew the video was false," she said. "Not consciously, but I knew." "Then why did you fire me?" She took a breath. "Because believing you betrayed me was easier than admitting I cared what happened if you didn't." Ethan looked at her for a long time. Then he nodded. "That makes sense. It was cruel. Yes, I'm trying to apologize. You are possibly the least graceful person I have ever seen attempt it." Amelia stared at him. He almost smiled. Then his expression became serious again. "I went to that building because I was following a shell company tied to Harrove. Victor's people knew. They made sure the camera saw me. I know, I should have told you. Yes. I didn't because I thought I was protecting you. That was arrogant. Yes, a quiet understanding passed between them. Neither had trusted the other enough. Both had called it protection." Ethan looked toward the garden path. "I would like to be there for your surgery," Amelia answered before he could finish. "Yes." He turned back. "Okay." 6 weeks later, Amelia entered the operating room. The procedure lasted 9 hours. Dr. Patricia Wren, 54, had performed more than 300 complex spinal reconstructions. During the preoperative consultation, she told Amelia the case was difficult but not unprecedented. "I prefer patients who ask direct questions," Dr. Wren said. Amelia asked 11. Dr. Wren answered everyone. Ethan waited outside with Lily. Lily fell asleep across 2 chairs, with her jacket pulled over her and her sketchpad open against her chest. Ethan sat beside her. He did not pace. He did not check the clock every 30 seconds. He simply stayed. At 11:47 p.m., Dr. Wren came through the surgical doors. She was still wearing her scrub cap. Ethan stood. The reconstruction was successful, she said, L1 through L3. Better than projected. He released a breath. Residual signal? Above the threshold we hoped for. What does that mean? It means the recovery will be long, painful, inconsistent. He waited. Dr. Wren's expression softened. But the architecture is there. There is every reason to expect significant functional return. Ethan closed his eyes for 1 second. Thank you. He sat beside Lily again and placed his hand over hers without waking her. At midnight he looked around the waiting room. Fluorescent lights, acoustic ceiling tiles, a vending machine humming in the corner. For 7 years he had waited in rooms like this, for licensing hearings, insurance decisions, cardiac evaluations, custody paperwork, always while institutions decided what would happen to him next. Always alone, not this time. Amelia's first steps came 3 months later. They were not dramatic. There were no cameras, no board members, no reporters waiting to turn her recovery into a headline, only the rehabilitation suite on the 3rd floor. Parallel bars. A physical therapist named Marcus, whose patients seemed geological, and Ethan standing quietly near the wall. Amelia gripped the bars. Her legs trembled beneath her. Every muscle protested. Marcus watched her posture. Do not fight the shaking, he said. The shaking means they're working. She shifted her weight. 1 step. Pain tore through her lower back. A second. Her knee nearly folded. Marcus did not catch her too quickly. He knew the difference between support and interruption. A 3rd step, then a 4th. By the time she reached the end of the bars, sweat had gathered along her hairline. Her arms shook. Her breathing was ragged. But she was standing. Ethan had not moved. His face held the particular stillness of someone witnessing something he had waited for without allowing himself to expect it. How does it feel? He asked. Amelia considered the question. The sensation was not clean or triumphant. It was pain. Pressure. Muscles waking badly after 5 years of silence. But beneath all of it was something else, like something I forgot I was allowed to want. Ethan crossed the room. Amelia let him. There was no music, no perfect light, no miraculous ending that erased what had happened. Just 2 damaged people in a rehabilitation room on a Tuesday morning, still carrying scars, still making mistakes, still choosing to remain. Amelia realized that healing did not look like returning to the person she had been. It looked like continuing as the person she had become. She could live with that. By the last evening of the year, Ethan had moved into a larger apartment. The neighborhood had a park, a school 3 blocks away, and a coffee shop Lily loved because the owner kept dog biscuits beside the door. Ethan cooked in the kitchen. Amelia sat at the table reviewing a contract. Her wheelchair was folded against the wall, not hidden, not rejected, simply resting there like a tool she still needed on difficult days. She had been practicing partial weight-bearing for 2 months. Some mornings she could cross a room with a cane. Other mornings she could barely stand. She had stopped measuring progress by daily averages after Marcus told her that averages were an excellent way to turn recovery into disappointment. Amelia had found the advice so useful that she increased his salary. Lily sat across from her, coloring with fierce concentration. Finally, she turned the page around. 3 figures stood beneath a bright blue sky. A tall man with dark hair, a small girl between them, and a woman standing beside a wheelchair. The chair was still there, but it was no longer the center of the picture. Above the figures, in Lily's careful handwriting, were 2 words. My family. Amelia stared at the drawing. The woman was standing. Lily had drawn her that way without asking whether it would become true. Children possessed a confidence most adults spent their lives trying to recover. From the kitchen, Ethan called. Whatever she drew, don't encourage her. She's already impossible. Too late, Amelia said. Lily grinned. Her whole serious face broke open with delight. Then she looked at Amelia. Are you going to stay for always? Ethan went quiet in the kitchen. Amelia placed the drawing carefully on the table. She had answered questions involving billions of dollars. Hospital mergers, lawsuits, patient lives. None had required this much precision. I live here now, she said. Is that enough? Lily tilted her head. She considered the answer with the gravity of a judge reviewing evidence. Then she nodded. Yeah, that works. Ethan brought dinner to the table. He set a plate in front of Amelia without asking whether she was staying. There was no need. She was staying for dinner. She was staying tonight. She was staying because this was where she belonged, and somehow quietly that had become a fact. Outside, the city moved beneath the winter sky. Traffic, lights, millions of lives continuing without permission. For years, Amelia had heard the city as a demand, a machine that needed her to control it. That night, it sounded different. It sounded like company. Lily talked about opening a veterinary hospital with a rooftop goat garden. Ethan explained why this was structurally impractical. Lily explained why he lacked vision. Amelia picked up her fork, and the 3 of them ate together. No cameras, no speeches, no grand declaration that everything had been fixed, because it had not. Ethan still carried 7 stolen years. Amelia still woke some mornings with pain she could not describe. Lily still checked twice to make sure her father was nearby whenever she entered a crowded building. Healing had not erased any of it, but Victor was in prison. Ethan had his name back. Children were receiving surgery through Lily's fund. Amelia was learning to walk, and none of them were alone. Months earlier, in a cold hospital corridor, Amelia had looked at a maintenance worker and told him to stop pretending. In the end, he did, so did she.